All right, we are recording. Okay, so we're gonna do we're gonna get our skeletal mesh. We're gonna create a character in Ready Player Me. We're not gonna do metahumans right now. It's a little bit too much to do at the moment, especially starting out. But again, what we do with the Ready Player Me character is definitely translates over to more complex characters or other sorts of characters. So I want you to go to readyplayer.me if you haven't already, and you go ahead and create an account for yourself so that you can do this. The other website is mixamo.com, which you can log into as well. Sure, what's with the scaling here? My guy's looking a little smushed. What's the first option? Good question. I don't know, just player, I would say. I don't think I'm a developer. What's the deal here? Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble with the screen share. That's strange. So go ahead and do that, and we'll switch. I'll start back in a second. There we go. All right, I already have these accounts, so I'm just gonna start going through it. Ready Player Me is pretty easy. Make an avatar. We're not gonna spend class time making avatars. I already have one made. If you're trying to follow along, that's fine. If you just click the create avatar button, it will just generate run for you. That's fine to use if you want to follow along live today. You can go back after hours and customize your avatar to your heart's content, but not right now, not necessary. So I'm gonna have some avatars here that have been made in the past. I'm just going to download it. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but on the Ready Player Me website, in your once you have an account, you can go to your My Avatar section, and then it will show all of your people. And if you click the little three dots in the top right, it will say download avatar.glb. That's what we want to do. And I'm going to download it and stay organized. Just going to put it in my desktop. I'm going to put it in a folder. You can call this whatever you want, but I'm going to call it RPM for Ready Player Me underscore, and I'm just going to call it the date, Feb 16 for today's date. Well, February 16th already. Crazy. And I'm also, the name that Ready Player Me spits out is unusable. So I'm also going to call this Ready Player Me, Feb 16, and maybe I'll just call it raw, because it's straight from Ready Player Me. This terminology is I'm just kind of making it up to stay organized. Okay. So a third thing that I would like you to do is open up an Unreal Engine project. Doesn't really matter which one it is right now. We can import our character into it, but open up a project. I'm just going to open up the one that I've been using for class. If you're having trouble getting Unreal to open, so remember I said beginning of class, some of these computers are not helping us. So just let me know. Maybe I can help. Maybe we can switch spots. If you opened up Unreal, you probably got this default landscape map. Just to make a little bit smaller world, I'm going to go to File, New Level, and just go to the basic instead of the open world map. It's a little less overwhelming and a lot smaller just to start with. Question? So another way to do it, if you're like this right now, right? The dock. So over here in the right, it says dock and layout. And then it should save into the settings. I think that's why mine was already like that. From window content browser right there, you could open up a separate content browser if you wanted to. You could open up 4 different content browsers if you wanted to. Yeah, and again, this is Unreal's new to almost all of you. So if you have general questions, no matter how basic, don't be afraid to ask. We are moving through this rather rapidly, so a lot of stuff that I think is obvious is I'm probably just going to pass over. So don't be afraid to ask. Yes.
Drop an object in Unreal Engine, you hit like W to move it on this plane. Is there a way to pick it up and move it without having to go through like the W like spoke axis? So like when you hit, let's say you drop a mountain, like the only way you can move it is to hit W and pull on one of the 3 like pivot points.
Yeah.
Is there like a click button that you can actually click it and move it into space in a quicker way?
You drop something in here.
So now you can move it up. You can move it in that space.
Right.
Is there a way to basically click the object and move it in like sandbox form outside of those parameters of just the 3 spokes? Like,
You have a specific location you want it already?
Exactly. And like you have an asset and you're trying to move it outside of just these 3 little limiters. So like if you're grabbing, how like in, let's see, I'm starting to use other software. Let's say you like copy something, like you're gonna grab something in Photoshop, you just like drag it, selects the whole asset, and you can move it around within that space.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's a way to highlight an object and move it around into that space without the tedious way.
Are you talking about duplicating?
No.
It's not like that.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Isn't it the same as Photoshop? I feel like it's the same. Like you're still moving it around. You want to, you don't want to have to grab onto the arm. You want to just
exactly
like this.
Yeah, exactly what you just did right there.
Well, I can't tell you that. That's a trade secret. You can, so this is common with most 3D tools. If I zoom in here, so you can grab onto the question was there just a little bit more intuitive way to drag things around rather than grabbing on each of the 3 axes at a time. So instead of grabbing on 1, you can grab on to 2, which is, see where the blue and the green kind of meet in that rectangle. So if I grab onto that, then I can translate it in the Z and the Y at the same time, but not the X. If you click on the little dot in the middle, then you should be able to freely do it. But since I have snapping on right now, it's snapping around. But it's still not going to do Z because, well, maybe it will do Z now. It depends on the camera angle, right?
That's it. That was perfect.
And you know what? Going into that, I was confused by the question, but also not sure of the answer. And I figured it out live. We didn't plan that. Question. You mean the snapping? Oh. Oh. We just Oh, okay. You are in some sort of crazy project. Let's this is a computer that can't open. That would be huge. What's the resolution? I think just the preset that you were in was strange. Just go to File, New Level, and then do that basic one. This makes it a little bit more manageable. All right, so I have an Unreal Engine project open here, and I did download my Ready Player Me character somewhere here. Where's that at? Yeah, so I have my Ready Player Me GLB file here, and I'm going to import it into Unreal. Now, this is a little bit of a tedious process because we're going to import it twice because Ready Player Me has this really weird texture problem that the textures essentially break when we convert it to FBX file, and it's super annoying, and it only started happening about a year ago, and I wasn't aware of it last spring when I did this class, and I was just failing really hard in this live demo actually a year ago today. And well, I have a workaround, but it's just a little annoying because we have to import twice. So follow with me. I think this is fairly bulletproof now. Famous last words. So I'm going to create a folder in Unreal Engine 2 just to stay organized. I'm going to call this Ready Player Me _ Feb 16. Call it whatever you want. And I'm going to import that GLB file. Turns out Unreal Engine does natively take GLB files now, which is great. But I'm only importing this now to get the textures essentially, because we're going to take the GLB file back into Blender after we do this, and then take it into Mixamo. It's a little bit of a convoluted pipeline, but because of Ready Player Me, we just have to do it. So I'm going to import that GLB file into Unreal, and it's going to import the mesh and any sort of animations it has. That's fine. I might be able to actually just say don't import the skeletal mesh, but I don't want to confuse you any further. Really, I just want the textures. So I'm just going to click import, not touch anything else. And fingers crossed, it should import all of those textures that were on the character. It should create all the materials and everything, which is awesome. That's what we want. Believe me, this is a lot more streamlined way than it was last spring, but still slightly convoluted. We didn't used to have to do this. So in Unreal, we've talked about this briefly last week. The red files, see how they have the red color coding at the bottom there? Those are texture files. texture files are combined together. Say, for instance, look at this, the faceware. See, faceware actually has 3 separate textures. Has like the weird Jason mask, Friday the 13th, the actual color information, which is highlighted by -D. And then we have the orange one in the middle. This is the, what do you want to call it? I guess it's like a PBR texture. It has the metallic and ambient occlusion and roughness information in it. So you don't really need to know what that is, just trust me. And then the one on the right, the -N, Faceware Halloween -N, that is the normal map, the bump map that gives us the fake bumpiness. Those 3 textures together combine to create, where is it? This green one, this is a material. Materials are green in Unreal, called, I'm not sure why it's called Wolf 3D. Something to do with Ready Player Me's default naming. But this is the faceware material, which is essentially the paint that goes on the face mask. Okay? Then we have these assets. The pink one, see it says skeletal mesh. Pink ones are skeletal meshes. The light orange one here is a physics asset, which we're not going to really worry about right now. And then the light blue one is the skeleton. You can see in the avatar there, it actually shows the skeleton. There's a lot of other textures here. There's a lot of other materials here. We will use all of those momentarily. But I want you to click on, if you're able to, you could just watch too. But if you are following along, go ahead and click on the pink one, the skeletal mesh. And it will open up the skeletal mesh editor in Unreal. And you can drive yourself around in here. You can look at him. You can spin around him. And, you know, it looks like the avatar from the website, which is great. That's what we want. Mission accomplished so far. And a couple things to show you here. My screen just flickered, but I still have power. What the hell? Anybody else's screw up? Somebody kick something? Does it, if you hit the alien button, does it power back on? Oh, for real? Well, you guys just watch. We got this cool post lab. Check it out. Man. It's a friendly reminder. Don't forget to save. Not sure how far along you guys were, but anyways, where was I? This is the skeletal mesh editor. Up in the top right, there's 3 little tabs that we can click between. Right now, I am in the, this is actually called the skeletal mesh tab, I guess. If I click on the one to the left, it's a little skeleton icon. It shows me all of the joints in my character. Here's the hierarchy on the left. You don't really need to do anything with this right now. It's just something to know. This may be useful to us in the future. And I could also show the skeleton. Here's the skeleton on my character. If you wanted to see it, sometimes it's useful to see. I just went to character, bones, and then usually it's selected only, but I just put on all hierarchy. Just showing you stuff. That's not super crucial to know. And then the last tab is the physics asset, which we don't really need to use. That's if you're doing any sort of like ragdoll physics, or you have clothes on the character and you want them to deform, like a cape or something like that. We don't need to worry about that. If we go back to the skeletal mesh tab, we also see the skeleton here. Your windows might be on the different sides depending on your Unreal Engine. But you should also see this asset details with all the lists of these materials. This is important because these are the materials that are on my character. If I click on highlight or isolate, I can isolate and highlight the parts of the body that these things go on. So for instance, the face wear. If I click on highlight on face wear, you see that little yellow outline that pops up on it. If I click isolate, it should isolate just that part of the mesh, those polygons that have this face wear material on it. The material is arbitrary. I could put whatever I want here. I could put the hair on the face mask just by changing it. But obviously, it doesn't look right because the hair was never meant to go there. That's where that UV mapping stuff comes in that we were talking about. In our class, we pretty much just put the appropriate materials and leave them there instead of messing with things. But you can plug in whatever you want. You could export this texture. I could open this material up and export this texture and draw on it in Photoshop, like write spooky on here or something, resave it, re-import it into Unreal, and then you would have spooky written across the face mask. It's just basic Unreal stuff. So this is already set up with the materials in the correct spot. There may be instances where you bring something into Unreal and it doesn't have the correct materials applied to it, which is going to be the case in a minute here when we start to do the skeletal mesh workflow, because Blender is going to break it for us. You know, if anybody is more Blender inclined and they have a better pipeline, I'm happy to entertain that by all means. Anything that makes us more efficient. Okay, so I'm going to switch out of Unreal, and you should have Blender installed on these computers. I'm going to delete this and start at 0. Actually, I'm going to start a new project. Prefer Blender because Blender can open GLB files. Maya cannot without a plugin. Yeah. What we're doing in Blender is just like a couple clicks. We're not learning Blender. So in Blender, when you open it up, it's going to look like this. It has some basic stuff in there. Just select all this stuff and just delete it. Hit delete. What the heck? What the heck? What? Don't download it because it's probably just going to get erased. What computer numbers are you? It says on top of the monitor. Wait, is this everybody?
Yeah, they buy it though. This is number 8.
Fucking devastating. Why is Blender not on these computers? Let me check something. You're going to see all my email. I'm going to pause the recording. This is unexpected. Blender's like the basic software and it's in the list. All right, well, it's pretty simple what we're doing in Blender anyways. But none of you are going to be able to do what I'm doing now. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this in Blender, and then I'm going to upload these 2 assets to Google Drive, and then I'll share it in Discord. Okay? Wow, really convoluted. Actually, you know what? Let me... That is very vague.
Mine too. Not enough.
Yes. Yeah, just select the armature. It's probably just the blender's default joint size is not good. All right, let's recap again. So opening up Blender, I'm selecting everything, deleting everything, file, import, GLTF 2.0.glb, import, navigating to wherever you saved your Ready Player Me character. Here's mine, import. Alt left click allows you to orbit, Alt right click allows you to zoom, Alt middle click allows you to pan around. If you're not seeing textures, you can turn those on by clicking on the dot to the right of the blue one up here to go into shaded mode. You don't have to go into shaded mode. It's just for your own sanity that the textures are there. Doesn't really matter. We're not going to use the textures from Blender anyways, but just so you can see what it looks like. You can go ahead and delete the armature if it is giving you problems. You may see a bunch of giant balls on there. I don't for whatever reason, but you can just delete it. Armature being the thing up here. Armature is the word that I was thinking about when we were talking about skeleton and joints. Blender calls it an armature. Okay, so now I have a 3D model. It's not a skeletal model anymore. It's just a model. We're going to re-rig it in Mixamo, but I need to export it first. So I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX. Where do you want to save it? Go ahead and navigate to that. I'm going to call it RPM, Feb16 underscore. I'm going to call it for Mixamo. And I'm going to click export.
Do you have to add textures to it when you're exporting, or is that like other stuff?
You can. I didn't, but they're going to be all messed up anyways, so it's not even worth it. The naming conventions that Ready Player Me does like base color 1, base color 001, and Blender gets confused about Blender and Unreal get confused, and sometimes they put like the eye texture on the whole body is obviously wrong. And so we're just going to manually reassign the textures. That's a good question, though. Okay, so I exported the FBX file, which I have in a folder here. Right here. I just called it for Mixamo. And I'm going to go back to my web browser, go to Mixamo. This robot dude is having the time of his life. So after you log in, this website's super simple. On the right side, there's an upload character button. Click the little text here or drag it in. I'm going to select the FBX file that I made and let it process and cross my fingers. If it doesn't process, try it again and cross your fingers. Sometimes, it's a web-based thing, so sometimes there's a server glitch or something. If it keeps failing, then there's something wrong with your model, some sort of incompatibility. Are you trying to import the GLB?
No, I feel the wall issue we have is
What?
I don't know.
Okay, so in Mixamo, after you import your character in Mixamo, if you get to this step, you're going to be good to go. It's going to work. You might get some weirdness with the joints bending, but that's not something we can do something about. I'm just talking about processing in Mixamo with the auto rigger. So go ahead and click next. And you need to assign these points. Where's the chin at? Where are the wrists at? Where are the elbows at? Try to be as accurate as possible with this. It's important. This creates the skeleton for your character. And I would do the standard skeleton, which should be the default. And you definitely want to use symmetry on a humanoid character unless you have a non-symmetrical humanoid. So after you've done all that stuff, you can hit next. If you're looking for a reference, here's a little reference of where you should place this. Was deleting the isosphere, did that work?
Yeah.
Huh. It's not as exciting anymore without the big sphere on his crotch.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
You got the big sphere?
Yeah.
Go back to Blender and you got to delete something else that didn't get deleted in the. Yep, you just drag them on.
What could that be though?
Icosphere. It's like an invisible thing. It won't let you do it. Should be. Should be.
And I have to.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know what these icosphere things are, y'all. Like, you're making these characters. I didn't get that. Strange. Today's not our day. So after you set all of those points, go ahead and click next. It will take 30 seconds up to 2 minutes. If it takes longer than 2 minutes, maybe give it another minute. It'll eventually error out, but depending on how complex your character is, it could take longer. These characters are not very complex. Also, like server traffic, depending on how many people are currently auto rigging, it could be slower too. But then it will process and you should see your character animate right away with the default animation, which is pretty cool to see. And that's what we want. Now the characters shouldn't have textures on them because if you were following what I did, I didn't export textures from Blender. If I did export textures from Blender, you would probably see materials on the character, but they would probably be all messed up. Which is why we exported the text, why we imported the GLB into Unreal originally, was to get all of these materials. So otherwise, it's a lot more annoying to export textures from Blender. So we're bypassing that. And we're going to put them on manually in a little bit. So next step, after you get to this, go ahead and click next. It's going to pop up the character in the main window. And here in the top, you can select animations, which probably is already selected for you. Also, the characters section, Mixamo has some characters as well, if you wanted to use an avatar from there. But in the animations section, you can pick animations. And it should work pretty well. There are some parameters over on the right that we can mess with, like how enthusiastic is this Roomba dancing? Let's crank it up, baby. It's got a little bit more swagger now. Maybe we'll do not so enthusiastic. It's just a little less in the hips. Now we got a lot of hips. I'll crank the overdrive up too. Ooh. Now we're moving. These parameters aren't just all goofy fun. Some of them are incredibly useful, like the arm spacing slider. This doesn't seem to be a problem with my character here. maybe if there's, I don't know if that thumb collides through the chest right there, just a tiny bit. You see that going through the chest? We're going to learn how to fix things like this manually in Motion Builder. Remember the very first class, I think it was, I gave the example of my Dubstep Dinosaurs video with the T-Rex. Like, how do I keep those arms in the holes of that costume? Because they kept moving through the costume, right? It was a very tedious process. This is a similar example where the thumb is colliding through the chest. Mixamo doesn't know that's a problem. We can identify that's a problem. We don't have the skills right now to manually fix this. So all we have access to is the slider. It says character arm space. And all this is going to do is just bump out the arms a little bit, which you can see now it doesn't get as close to the chest. So that's really useful because it's just a simple slider and I fix that problem. If I go too crazy, I might start to get, it's not the same dance anymore, right? If I shrink it down, I'll probably collide way into the body like that. That seems right. So finding the appropriate value for your character is a manual process. Whether you're using a slider or you're actually modifying the joints in Motion Builder, it's going to depend on the character. If this character had, I don't know, like a big baggy hoodie on or something like that, the arm spacing would have to be a little bit more aggressive. This t-shirt that he's wearing is pretty form-fitting, so I can get away with a smaller value. Right now we don't have the skills to modify this manually, so we have to use the slider in Mixamo. So after you have a dance that you're happy with, keep that in the back of your head. I'm going to switch to a different animation though. I'm going to type in T-pose. The T-pose is a position that we're going to use a lot in this class. T-pose is just standing straight, feet parallel, arms straight out in kind of a cross pose, palms down, thumb relaxed. This is a T-pose. We do get a little bit of stretching here in the armpits, but that's okay because we're not going to be doing these sorts of animations. In T-pose, I want you to download this, so click the orange button. And the settings here, we're going to leave at the defaults. FBX, yes. With skin, yes. Everything else, the same. Download. I'm going to choose to save this in the same folder, RPM, Feb 16. I'm just going to call this T-pose, something like that. Save it. Okay. FBX should be the default. And then I'm going to hop back over to Unreal. Just download T-pose. I'm trying to show you something here. So you could download your animation. That's what we're going to do next. But show you the T-pose first. In Unreal Engine, we have skeletal meshes, which in our case is the dude T-pose right now. Skeletal meshes, and then you have animation, which is the Rumba dance, right? Or whatever, the hip hop dancing or the death sequence or whatever the animation is, right? Those things are separate from each other. We're going to import the T-pose into Unreal Engine. It's going to have the mesh attached to that skeleton. So we're telling Unreal Engine, there is a skeleton, which I called ReadyPlayerMe_T-pose, and it has the T-pose attached to it and it has this mesh attached to it. After we do that in Unreal, we're going to import a number of different other animations. But when we import those into Unreal, we're not going to import them with the mesh. You don't have to import the mesh every time you import a new animation because it's the same character with the same skeleton, if that makes sense. When we actually do it, it will make a little bit more sense. The reason for that is, well, it takes a long time. It can take a long time to import the meshes. So by not importing the meshes every time, just the animation data, we can save some time with doing that. File size doesn't take up as much space. It's just more efficient. One slight tangent before we do that, though. This is a very good reminder to save your stuff. See how every single one of these have the asterisks on them? That means that they are not saved. If I was to lose power right now, how would that ever happen? Not at NYU, unexpected. If I was to crash right now, none of my stuff would be saved. I would have to re-import all this stuff. Click the Save All button, either in the content browser or in File Save All. When you click Save Current Level, it's just saving the level, the stuff that you have in your level here and the stuff that is in the outliner, the position of those things. It is not saving anything new that you imported here. Only Save All saves all. So I just always say click Save All. Huh? When I click Save All now, it's going to say, hey, do you want to save all this stuff? Of course I do. Oh, I guess I'm saving the level too. Just call this the same thing. See all the asterisks disappeared? Now these files are written to a folder on my hard drive. If I look in my, let's navigate to this here. I have a T drive on my laptop, which I have my Unreal projects in. Unreal projects folder, mocap class 2024, mocap class 2024, content folder, RPM Feb 16. All that stuff that's in my content browser is right here. But it didn't get written here until I click Save All. Okay? What's up? So if you're ever paranoid, is my stuff ever, is it saved? Is this stuff I'm copying to my external hard drive, is it saved? You could navigate in Windows Explorer to see that it's here. Okay? Question? Won't let you do what? I was told that this is happening. All right, I'll put it on the list. Some sort of security software on these computers that's messing with everything, I swear. Sorry about that, y'all. It's out of my hands a little bit. Anyways, where was I? Oh, saving. Okay, so we made sure everything was saved. Now let's import our model from Mixamo. So I'm gonna click import, browse to the T-pose mesh. Leave the defaults here. Interesting. That's not the skeleton I want. So when you're doing this the first time, we want skeletal mesh, import mesh. Skeleton should be blank, but it's not right now because Unreal thinks I want to use this skeleton. Animations, yes. Basically the defaults. But this skeleton should be blank. Essentially, I'm saying this skeletal mesh should use this skeleton that exists in this Unreal Engine project already. Sometimes you want this to happen. When we import animations, we want this to happen. But for right now, I don't want this to happen. So I'm going to click on the drop down and go to clear so that it says none for skeleton. Essentially, this is going to create a new skeleton for the skeletal mesh, which then I can import other animations and say, these animations should use this new skeleton. Go ahead and click import. You might get some warning about smoothing groups. That's fine. Just ignore that. We only have one file, so it doesn't matter. You could import multiple skeletal meshes at the same time and it would just do a pop-up every time you finished importing one. It's just, that hardly ever happens. Usually it's one at a time. So now I've imported the skeletal mesh, the T-pose animation, another skeleton, and we go ahead and open it up like we did before. And look at that, all the materials actually worked. So we don't even have to manually reassign things. If you do the GLB import into Unreal first and it creates those materials first, when you import the FBX, it's looking for these names of these files. And because they're already there, it just assigns them for you. That's nice. When I did this test earlier this week, I did the opposite and everything was broken in Unreal. I had to do it manually. So that's good. So this pipeline's better already. I also have an animation in here that's a T-pose, but that's not super important right now for us. If I double click on my T-pose mesh and I go to, I have a new tab up top now here. I have 4 of them. Remember before there was only 3. The green running person there, that is the animations tab. If you click on that, you will see animations down in the bottom. I only have 1 animation for the skeletal mesh imported right now. So this guy is just T-posing the heck out of things right now. It's just doing the best T-pose ever. And it's just playing T-pose. That's why this is flickering down at the bottom. I'm going to do file save all again because I'm paranoid. If you see me clicking on tabs at the top, that's because I docked some of my windows up top. If you have floating windows, you can just dock them in the top here. And then you can have your level and everything else easily available. Gets cluttered really quickly. So now I have my character imported, but I don't have any animations associated with it. So you might be thinking, we imported the GLB file. Why didn't we just use that? Can anybody explain why did we go through this process of going into Blender, going into the T-pose? Why did we do that? We had the textures with the GLB file. But what didn't we have? The what? Which is a universal thing for animation. We didn't have the animations, right? So we're doing a simple person's version of retargeting right now. In order to get access to all of Mixamo's animations, I need to use Mixamo's skeleton. The skeleton that we imported with the GLB file from Ready Player Me in the beginning is not the skeleton of Mixamo. Okay? And we haven't learned about retargeting in Motion Builder yet. So we're doing like this kind of convoluted process, which works, but is leaving out a lot of the technical stuff. So now let's go back to Mixamo. And let's download some animations. You pick whatever animations that you want. I'm going to get some dancing here. I'm going to get some idle sequences. I'm going to get whatever. It doesn't matter. And when you download these, I don't care how many you download. When you download these, click the orange button again. But this time, pick without skin. Everything else is the same, but skin without skin. So I just want this to be the animation. I don't want it to be the mesh. So I'm going to download a couple of these. I'm just picking random animations here. There are quite a bit of animations. And some of them are meant to be combined with other animations. And some of them might not be looping. They might walk and then it chops back to the beginning. We'll talk about stuff like that a little bit later. But at this point, just any animation will prove our point.
What are the T-pose? I don't feel like my figure is completely in T-pose. Your arms are not widely extended.
They're like down the side. So maybe you're looking at the skeletal mesh file rather than the animation file. So this is the first thing. Because the mesh is a little bit of a hack. The mesh is still in A pose, not in T pose. So I downloaded 3 different animations from Mixamo. One of the reasons that your character might not have its materials on it is because you put the Ready Player Me characters are in that subfolder. So if you dumped everything if you re-imported it into that Ready Player Me character folder that you have, the textures should all be on there, I think. You know what I mean? Okay. Because the character's all white, right? Yeah. So when you this is that big a deal, but it's just so you buried all this stuff in here. So when you import this, import this, it doesn't know that all this stuff is here. Right? So it's going out and it's looking for this stuff. It's like, hey, I can't find it. So what I would do, let's just do this as a test. You could move it all out, but you have to do it before you import it. So otherwise, maybe not. Can I just dump it into here? Do a test. It might fail. If it fails, I'm going to feel. Undo. There we go. Yeah, there's touches. Okay, so I have my character imported, but now I want to import animations. So I go to import, and I have 3 different animations here. I'm just going to control select them so I can import them all at the same time. Go to open, and this is very important right here. You want to select the correct skeleton. In your case, you probably only have one that is obvious, But I have I did a test while you all were on break, so I created a duplicate. So the raw one is the GLB file that we imported. We don't want that one. We want the one that's the T-pose, the FBX file. So I'm going to select feb16 underscore T-pose. You probably only have two. You might just have the raw and the T-pose one. So this is telling these three animations to use this skeleton. Usually this is pretty obvious which one to pick. Usually Unreal picks the right one by default, but sometimes you need to manually tell it. So when I click import, all these animations are going to be attached to that mesh and that skeleton. Import, import. Now, if I filter by animations, oops, why are you not showing my animations? If I just type animation in, now I have, well, 4 animations, because I guess the T-pose is one too. If I were to click on the skeletal mesh again and go to the animation section up top, the little running green guy, why do I only have one? Interesting. Whoa, this is not right. What happened there? Dude, this one's messed up too. That looks pretty cool. See, I think it's using the wrong skeleton is the problem. Oh, I know why. Because I just clicked import, import, import. I didn't pick the right skeleton each time I imported. So this is a dead giveaway example that you're using the right skeleton, the right or wrong skeleton. This one is correct. But see, the other two that I imported didn't even pop up down here because it's not, I didn't pick the right skeleton. I didn't even do this on purpose either. This is just incompetence on my part. So I messed up. So I'm going to delete those 2 skeletons that messed up, or not 2 skeletons, but 2 animations. And then I'm going to re-import them, the sitting one and then the other dance one. Yeah, that's right. See, I picked the wrong skeleton. I didn't pick the T-pose one. I picked the one that came in with my GLB, which is maybe a reason when you import that GLB in the beginning, you don't import the animations or don't import the skeletal mesh, just import the materials. Does this one work now? Yeah, there we go. So now all 4 are down there because they're all using the same skeleton. And if they're all using the same skeleton, that means that I could animate them onto the character. I could blend them onto the character. You can do all those sorts of things. So I can go from a clapping pose to a kicking pose. Any questions so far? Those of you that are following along, it's amazing that you're still with me after all these problems. I don't expect you to get this right away. This is why this whole thing is one whole assignment. But this is crucial step because the motion capture data that you record custom is the same thing as this kick, basically. It's the same idea. We're going to be importing skeletal mesh into Unreal. We're going to be importing animations into Unreal. Make sure it's assigned to the right skeleton. All that sort of thing. The same stuff. Any questions? Okay. Save all. Shortcut keys for save all is Control-Shift-S. Just get in the habit of doing that. So now I could drag animations into my world. But when you drag them in, you see that they're not playing. If if I looked at this in the details, the animation section, I could pick which animation that I want on that asset. I could choose if it loops, where does it start, is it playing or not, but it's not playing. It's not playing because Unreal Engine is not playing. If you click the play button in Unreal Engine, it will play, but that's not super useful for us because we're not making a game. What we need to do to get it to play is to put it on a timeline using Sequencer. So we're going to switch gears now and look at Sequencer. I'm going to delete that from my world real quick. So to open up Sequencer, you're going to go up here to the little slate and click Add Level Sequence. Not the one that I have highlighted blue. I just selected that one because otherwise the overlay was on top. But Add Level Sequence. And when you do that, it's going to ask you, what do you want to call it and where you want to save it. I'll just call this Feb 16. Usually I call it LS for level sequence underscore Feb 16. And save it wherever you want to save it. Down bottom here, it's going to open up a new window, the sequencer window. There's nothing here, just infinite possibility. So if I jump back to my content browser, I'm going to drag my T-pose skeletal mesh, the pink one, into my world. Wherever. It's not super important right now. And I'm going to switch back to Sequencer. And I'm not going to assign it an animation in the world. I'm going to assign it an animation in Sequencer. Okay? But right now, Sequencer is blank. There's nothing in here. There's a couple different ways to get things into Sequencer. The easiest is probably just dragging it in from the outliner, just drag and drop. You can also click the little green plus button on the left side of Sequencer. Then it says Add Actor Sequencer. Here you can search for things. If you have something selected, up like I do, it says up top, add, this is the name of the mesh that I have selected. You can click it there. Half dozen different ways to do the same. I'm just going to drag it in. When you drag it in, you will get a track for that skeletal mesh. You know it's a skeletal mesh because the little icon is a cute little skeleton. So here, we can animate different things. There's lots of stuff that we can do here. There's a lot of plus buttons here that we can add different functionality. But I'm going to keep things simple right now and just mess around with the animation track. These are called tracks down here. If you click the plus on the animation track, you're going to get a list of all of the animations that are using the skeleton that that skeletal mesh has. Devastating. It's good that you named them. So I think that's the reason. And you also we're in that folder. This is using the cell. This is using the capacity cell. This is not the TPO cell. This is me. Let's do a test. But here is this called TPO storage. Drag the TPO. This is the one that has the animation on it. You can double check by clicking on it and then go into the animation section and you should see this animation. So if they're here, that means you have access to it. So now you should be able to drag it in and it should have the plus. Yeah, if you ever don't have a list of animations here, it's probably because you dragged the wrong mesh in that didn't have any animations associated with it, which is fairly easy to do if you're importing multiple skeletal meshes. Just make sure that you are assigning the right skeleton to them. A quick way to double check to make sure that you actually do have animations is to double click on the skeletal mesh in not in Sequencer, but in the content browser. And then in the top, the little green running guy, and you should see a list of animations here. If you have the list of animations here, that means you're going to be able to access them in Sequencer. It's a lot of stuff. This is not Unreal Engine 101 stuff anymore. It's a lot to keep track of. So there's definitely going to be some growing pains here. Okay, so now if I see my list of animations, I can go ahead and select one. So maybe I want him to sit down and clap. Now I can scrub the timeline and I see him clapping. I can hit the space bar and see him clapping. This sequencer window, pretty much like any timeline you've ever used in your life.
For the green, that's the pre-roll we're talking about.
Oh, over here?
If you can get to that spot.
Yeah. Okay. The negative numbers of the pre-roll are kind of arbitrary. When you click render, you can choose to not start at 0. So you can grab onto these green and red lines. Those are sort of set like the start point and the end point of your workspace or your composition if you're used to After Effects. You can also grab onto these tracks and move them around. So see how I grabbed the animation track and I dragged it to start at frame 75. So dude here sits in his A pose until the animation plays, and then it starts playing. Also notice that this animation goes on longer than my current workspace. You can make your workspace longer by dragging out these numbers down at the bottom. So now my entire sequence is, I don't know, I'll just do an even 500 frames on this. Oops, accidentally deleted everything. I'll just do an even 500 frames. So eventually the animation is going to stop right there. And then he pops back to his default pose because the animation stopped on the timeline, which makes sense, right? If I was to add another animation by clicking the plus and say I'll go to this kick thing, now he goes from sitting directly into the kicking animation. There's no blending or anything like that. It just, the one animation stops and the other starts immediately. You can zoom in and out on the timeline by holding down Control and using your scroll wheel. You can also use the little slider bar down here to zoom in and out. It's very much like After Effects. if I went and I took the Martello kicking animation and I dragged it on top of the sitting and clapping one, you're going to see that I get this little hourglass shape that I talked about right here. This is the blending zone between these two animations. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get great results. These are pretty dramatically different animations, right? He's going from sitting to this kicking pose. How is that going to look? Let's check it out. So he goes from sitting, and then it starts to blend. It's actually not that bad, to be honest. Bam. I don't know. Can you kick and immediately go? Can you sit and immediately go into a kick? I can't even do a kick, so it doesn't matter if I'm seated or not. So that's how you can blend animations together. Again, this is going to be useful for your custom motion capture too. Animation files are animation files. We got these animation files from Mixamo. You're going to be making your own animation files. It's the same stuff. You're going to use Sequencer to play your animations in your films. Yeah. That's a fantastic question. Absolutely. Not only should you, well, going into the shoot, you should know what you're shooting, period. But you should also know how the pieces are fitting together. 100%. 100%. You could also record this as one take, too. Your character's seated, and then you bust in my door, and I immediately go into my kick, right? What if that's just one recording? In our case, we don't have that. You can't go on Mixamo and get seated in chair into kick. That doesn't exist, right? So we had to combine those things together. Is it better for you to do it as one recording or two separate things? Yeah, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. There is advantages to doing it separately in that you can work with each part of the animation and kind of finesse it a little bit. But there's also value in just doing it all combined because you're going to get a more realistic blend because the blend was real, right? Like if you're doing the motion capture, your body physically got out of the chair and did the kick. So we're going to see you get up and, oh, you stumble for a second or something, like that gets recorded, right? Whereas if you just did a kick animation and a seated animation, that doesn't, you don't get that. That makes sense. That's a great question, though. And I think I have more animations here too, so I could just keep going. So the guy's going to do his kick. Maybe he does his kick and immediately goes into a dance. Bam. But see that little weird warping right there? That's where blending causes a problem. Because when he does that kick, say this is my middle spot right here. This is, you can't see there's this dark spot on the floor right here. When he does his kick, he takes a step and gets off center and then does the kick, right? So then when he goes back to his hip hop dance, the hip hop dance is actually centered on this spot. So that's where he drifts backwards. It looks like he's ice skating backwards. So how do I resolve that? Easiest thing to do is to play around with where the blend starts at. Maybe give a little bit of room for looking at the kicking animation. Does he ever return back to that zero spot? If not, you might just have to live with it or try to fudge it. I don't know, have a bright light flash in the room to kind of mask your cut or something like that. Be creative. Have the camera go out of focus or something, or have us be distracted by some other element in your world. Or in that case, recording it as one take in your motion capture performance would be valuable as well. You know, if you're making a game, all of the motion capture for a game is recorded out in small segments because, again, the user, the player, gets to control when things happen, right? So all of those big movements have to be parsed out separately because the player might not do the big kick. They might do a punch first. Then they might do a kick. And they might do 2 kicks in a row. And then they do the hip hop dance. You know, you can't control it. So it needs to be parsed out separately and then creatively blended together to make it not look like crap. For our case with films, we have a lot more leeway. But here, now you can see the problems with blending. Some animations just aren't going to blend well together. I'm doing some quite drastic things here. Yeah, I don't think he ever returns to 0. See? Snaps back. Oh, it's a whole bunch of takes. Yeah. I would say no. No. And some takes are used just for reference too, and other takes are used like they'll do an animator take because they know that it's captured in a better way. A lot of different takes, just like shooting a real film. You know, if it's just video.
Yeah, I guess I would like more like I guess what you mentioned extreme. Like you mentioned like sitting in a chair and getting up and doing the motion. So like you would do like would you say they would do that function like that, or would they do sitting and then go to and then to
I think it really depends on the situation. If you're playing a game and it's like one of those quick time event games where you have to mash the A button, and then when you mash the A button successfully, then you do the dramatic push the chair back kick. That's one animation, and it's always going to be that animation. If you're giving the user more agency where you mash the A button, I'm doing this all in slow motion. This would happen very quickly in the game. Mash the A button, they push the chair out, and then they have to mash the Y button to do the kick. Then those would have to be separated, right? Because they might not push the Y button fast enough to get the kick. Maybe then they get punched in the face and they fall down, you know?
So it's like situational.
Completely situational based on what the developer is allowing the player to do and what the intent creatively is storytelling wise. Really good question though. In our case, it's probably just longer performances recorded. Unless, I don't know, unless somebody wants to do something interactive. All right, a couple other things to go through really quickly. This is how you get your avatar into Unreal with animation, which is the goal of your assignment. I also want to show you animating. We're going to animate a simple object, like a cube or a chair maybe. And we're going to animate a light, and we're going to animate a camera, and we're going to render all in the next 18 minutes. So simple cube. This cube could be anything. It doesn't have to be a cube. It could be a chair. You know what? Sometimes the cube freaks people out, so I'm just going to use a chair. Any mesh. Remember we talked about static meshes aren't animated, is what I said. Well, you know what? I'm going to animate a chair, but it's not going to animate in the same way that the body animates. I'm going to drag the chair into sequencer, and in the timeline here, I'm going to click on the drop down for transform, click down the drop down for rotation, and I'm going to animate the yaw. So I'm going to put a keyframe for yaw for 90 degrees, and then at, I don't know, 240 frames, I guess, I'm going to change the direction. I don't know, maybe say 360, add a keyframe. Maybe I'll make this 0 instead. You add keyframes just with this little plus circle button. And if you've ever used any software with keyframes, it always kind of looks like this. After Effects, Premiere, Blender. You can also toggle this key icon inside of the keyframe, this auto keyframes for you. So for example, if I don't have that selected right now, by selected I mean blue, like it is now. If I don't have it selected and I move the chair, see, I'm changing the value. But in my timeline, it never adds a keyframe there. If I do have that key icon selected and I make a change to my actor in the world, now it adds a keyframe there automatically. Sometimes this is useful to have on, sometimes it's not. It's easy to accidentally make a bunch of keyframes, especially when animating the camera. The example I'm giving right now is with a chair. This applies to anything that you animate in Unreal Engine. A camera, a chair, whatever. So now check it out. Now I have a magical spinning chair. It's not doing deform animation though. It's just translating. So you can animate translation and rotation and that sort of stuff on static meshes. But the chair itself is not deforming. You can also right click on the keyframes and change the interpolation. So right now this is set to a cubic interpolation, which means that it's easing in and easing out if you're familiar with After Effects animation. So it's ramping, it's accelerating and decelerating those keyframes. If you wanted to visualize this, I really like to see this. If you guys are more nerdy and technical, most animation softwares have what's called a graph editor. And if you select, say, the yaw, which is what I animated, and I click on this little graph icon over here, here I get a visual representation of my animation. Which is not, why is this not scaling? There we go. There we go. Zoomed it. Here I get a visual representation of that animation, the acceleration of that rotation. See how it eases in and eases out? If I was to go back to here and I'd select those keyframes and then I right click on them and I change this to linear, look at that curve now. Now it's just a straight line, right? There is no acceleration and deceleration. It's just a constant speed the entire duration of that animation. So good thing to know. It's kind of Unreal Engine Animation 101. My guy's just kicking and sitting here. Should put the chair behind him, actually. No, maybe another time. What about a light? My goal today was to put him in the chair, but we ran out of time because of all of our problems. What if we had a light in here? A light in the worlds. So I put the light in the world and I position it somewhere. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more intense. I drag it into my sequencer. Same thing as anything else. I just dragged it in from the outliner. And here I have things that I can mess with like intensity. And I should say color, but it's hidden behind that little tab, 33 items tab. There we go. Color. There's also a lot of other things that you can mess around with if you click the plus on light component. So I can mess with the intensity. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to just add some keyframes really quick. You can also copy and paste keyframes too. Control C, Control V. Just going to copy and paste and make a flickering light really quick. Change my intensity to, I don't know, 10 maybe. Or is this not want to do this? 12, good enough. Paste the 12s in between the 100s. Oh, look at that. I have a flickering lights with my keyframes here. The keyframes are just going from approximately 10 to approximately 100 in intensity. If I looked at that in the graph editor, it kind of looks like a sine wave sort of a thing. Some people like to use the curve editor. I like to use it. It helps me visualize the mathematics behind my keyframes. So now I have an animation, a light, a chair rotating. Let's throw in a camera. The easiest way to get a camera in your world is to click the little camera icon in Sequencer. Click that, it will put it right in Sequencer to start with. Syn Camera Actor. I'll also create a camera cut track for you. And you see it says Pilot Actor, Syn Camera Actor right now. That means that right now I am driving the camera around my scene. Here, let me park myself right on the chair here, and then I'll click the little eject button. And now I can see my camera's parked right on the chair. So you can take over this camera, and you get a little viewport over here of what the camera's looking at. You can take over this camera by clicking on the little camera icon right there on the Syn Camera Actor in Sequencer. So when I click this, I become the camera, right? How do I show it in the world? I basically have to eject from the camera, which you can do with this ejection button right there, or you can unclick the camera icon right here, and then I'm not the camera anymore. I am the editor camera. You just click on the little camera icon again. So clicking on and off. So now I could set keyframes for the camera and other things like focus and aperture. I'm not really going to mess around with that stuff right now to start with. I'm just going to move my camera. So maybe I'll set a keyframe here at 0, and then my animation's playing. Or maybe at, I'll have it just kind of slowly go in. Not slowly go in. So you could animate it by driving the camera, or you can animate it outside by looking at the camera. This would be a useful case where you would want to mess with the world coordinates versus the local coordinates, which is that little globe icon there. See, if I look down at the camera, see how the world coordinates are aligned to the grid of the world, but they're not aligned to the axis of the camera. So if I want to move the camera straight, I actually can't right now until I click this little globe icon right there. Now it's lined up with the camera, right? The x-axis is lined up with the camera. I'm going to click back on my camera icon here to become the camera and just kind of drive myself in a little bit. I have my keyframe key button clicked on, so it's auto putting keyframes as I move the camera. Here, and he's going to get up and kick. And we're going to zoom in. Or not zoom in, but move in really quickly. So if I play this, camera's moving. Boom. Best animation I've ever made in my life. I'm going to save this one. Other things that I would want to mess with is the focus. So I could set keyframes for the focus here. Just kind of quickly going through this now. Maybe everything is out of focus until we get to here. When you are focusing and you're clicked on the camera, in the details panel for the camera, you can click on focus settings drop down. and there's a little indicator here. It says draw debug focus plane, which is right there. If you click that toggle, it gives you like a visual indicator of the middle spot of where you're focused at. It makes it a lot easier to line that up. So maybe I have things out of focus and then it gets in focus. Or gradually goes out of focus. And then pow. Very exciting. And then he starts dancing. I think I'm just going to end it right when he kicks. So I'm going to click on this end workspace button right there, the little bracket, to jump the red line. It's right there. So it just cuts off right when he kicks because I'm going to animate it. I'm going to record it out. Boom. All right, let's record it out. This is the last thing that I want to show. So I'm going to click on the little slate. It says render this movie. Oops, not that. We want the movie. Oh, I do not have movie render queue turned on here. Dun dun dun. So if you click this and you get this window, this is the old way of doing things. It's being retired. I don't really want to show that. So for some reason, there's not the appropriate plugins turned on. So if you see that and you don't have the movie render queue, let's make sure that we have the appropriate plugins turned on. So I went to settings, plugins, and this is called movie render queue. And for some reason, it's not on for me. It might be on for you. I want to turn movie render queue on, just the top one. And I'm also going to turn on ProRes. I know this guy talks so much crap about Apple, but here he is using ProRes. I'm going to turn ProRes on. ProRes is a great codec. I'm going to turn that on so I don't have to render out to an image sequence. And unfortunately, when you turn on plugins in Unreal, you have to restart, so make sure you're saved. I'm going to do that really quick. The movie render queue is the new way of rendering things. It's not that new anymore. It's like 2 years old. Got to make sure I open the right level. There we are. You might have to open up your sequence again. Double click on it in the content browser. Opens up the sequence. Seems like everything else is working now. Cool. So now when I click on the little slate, it opens up the movie render queue. And here I can choose, click on unsaved config and settings. And here you can choose how to render it out. If you want to render it out as image sequences, you can. That's the highest res way to do things. But in my case, in the interest of time right now, I'm going to render out as ProRes because it will just be a video file. Not ProRes 444, that's unnecessary. Let's do ProRes 422. And I'm going to, in here is where you can choose, like if you have if you're not starting at frame 0 or you want to cut off at a certain time, what's your frame rate you want to use, what's your resolution you want to use by clicking on output, where do you want it to render to. The default rendering position is in the movie renders folder, in the saved folder in your project directory. So wherever you put that when you initially created the project, that's fine for right now. So I'm just going to click accept. 1080p is fine. Just going to click accept. And fingers crossed, I'm going to click render. Remember, what renders is what's in your camera cuts track. So if you click on the camera in your camera cuts track and you scrub your timeline, that's what it should look like when it renders. I'm going to click render. And I should see right away my beautiful animation. Boom. I saved this to the default spot. for me is in my T drive, Unreal Projects, mocap class 2024, mocap class 24, saved folder. This is where your screenshots go by default too. In the screenshots folder, here's my movie renders. Here's my movie. Oh my gosh, it's an MOV file. Boom. I'm gonna show my mom this one. I'm really proud of it. Not final project caliber right here, but I think you hopefully get the idea. So I want you to make something much more interesting than that and make a world for it. Find animation that makes sense with the world. Don't have them be separated. You try to do something that makes sense in the world that you're building, and bring a Ready Player Me character. If you want to explore with a different character from somewhere else, that's fine. But we didn't talk much about that in class, so you might find yourself in trouble a little bit. Bring a Ready Player Me character into Unreal. After putting animation on it, bringing it into Mixamo, exporting those animations, just like we did in class today, and just like I've recorded here for you as well, if you need to refer back to it. I'm also asking you to, if you want to do something crazy, like not use Ready Player Me, use another program, bring that character from whatever program that you choose into Mixamo, do the rigging in Mixamo, and bring it into Unreal. That would be cool too. We've had students in the past before use like VR sculpting apps where they, like paint something. They'll bring that into Mixamo, rig it, bring that into Unreal. It's kind of neat. And also, I would like you to use the same avatar and try to rig it in a way that breaks it. Don't put the foot on the foot. Put the foot on the head and see what happens. Okay. Is there any questions about that ask at all? I'm gonna try to get to the bottom of these post lab problems. If you come in to use the post lab and there's a problem, let me know. Okay. All right. Covered a lot of stuff today. Let me know if there's any problems. Okay. All right. See you next class.